Welcome to another edition of A Strange New Pod. I'm your host this evening, the Borg Queen of Puns, Brittany, alongside the best bridge crew in the quadrant. We have Jean-Luc Stuntman and hairstylist Lieutenant Hawk. Right? He really needed the hairstylist. Reigning Alamarine Hopscotch Champion, Ensign Erin. You're like, woo, 1, 2, 3, Alamarine. And our special guest, who is definitely not an undercover Maquis operative, Michael Schaus.
Hello, hello.
He might be.
Schaus.
Right?
He could be.
We'll find out.
Did the ship explode yet? We'll see.
I do have a Galor class cruiser behind me here. So
see, the plot thickens literally.
If he is, then we can at least extract a confession from him later.
Tell us how many lights there are. Rear Admiral Eric and Captain Julian are dealing with a Packlet issue outside of Altair 4, so they'll be back next week. In the meantime, glory to you and your houses.
Hey, we're all back.
Glory.
Yeah.
We're not all back. Some of us are back.
Hey, there's 4 of us. We'll make it work.
That's a
I'm
whole
excited to be here. I haven't been with you guys in a little while. This is fun.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we need to start, now that Lower Decks has come back, we'll be able to rotate more guests in again.
Yes.
We don't want to drag you in to be like, hey, do you want to talk about Cardassians for 5 hours straight? This is my TED Talk. And you're like, I have an hour.
I would see that TED Talk, though. That would be amazing.
Right? I'd be like Mariner with the board of like,
oh, yeah,
everything happening.
That's the way.
Okay. So, as always, a big thanks to Sam Dillard and Samo Studios for our awesome intro and outro music, which they'll plug in later, but I sang for you now. And to our Twitch collective, thank you for joining us on Subspace, as always. This week, of course, we're continuing our Best of Species Cardassians topic, Part 2, as we shift over to Deep Space Nine, the show that probably should have been renamed Keeping Up with the Cardassians.
It's so true.
I got one chuckle.
I think that would have been ahead of their time, though, wouldn't it?
OJ, though. Not when the lawyering happened, right? They got big
exactly.
No, in the
Whatever.
Twitch, if you think
We're going back.
could have happened.
If the glove fits, or the shoe. So special thanks to our patrons, Simon Stager, Jeff Reeve, Mariah Gossett, Anne Bradley, Spotted Giraffe, Rob, Jen Stein, Tina Alexander, Noe Santos, Kang Hui, JD, Takako Nagumo, Kara Kennedy, Mark, Dana Pearson, Fernanda Nogales, and SMK. SMK won our prize last night, I think, right? The sticker thing?
I think so.
I saw that this morning on Discord.
I wasn't on the watch along last night, so
Oh, the stickers are so cute.
I was
though.
obviously
Have
at
you
work
guys seen
until like 1 a.m., so I missed it.
them? The friendship stickers people are
I
winning.
love
So
them.
cute.
They're so cute.
Yeah.
I have one around here somewhere.
Oh, I was gonna say you already have one, but you and Julian live like 3 feet.
Yeah,
from each other,
Julian
so.
literally, the minute he has something, he's like, I have a gift for you. And he'll just like leave it outside. Or we see each other like 3 times a week, so. If any of you are interested in joining our collective, whether you're watching this live or later on, or learning more about our perks and bonus content, you can head on over to patreon.com/astrangenewpod and check it out yourself. Now it's time for your favorite moment. You ready, guys?
Yep.
It's time for drumroll. Maybe we get a whole string quartet in. Maybe, I don't know.
You're
This
doing
isn't
all the
Enterprise.
sound effects tonight. I love it.
It's time for the strange new loop. It's terrible. So with Lower Decks coming soon, which Cardassian would you guys like to show up, and why would they be on the show? Eric made this one up, by the way, because I could not think of a loop. Take your time.
Well, I think Gul Dukat, and I want Mariner to outsmart him and make him look like a dumbass, because that would be the best.
Oh, God. Just to get Marco Lamo back on Star Trek for any reason.
It wouldn't be a lame-o at all.
Well, like he would, because he would be there and he'd want to talk and have some like really convoluted, long, sort of like game to twist them through. And I think it would be funny if Mariner just immediately like cut him off and was like, I know what you're doing. This is what you're gonna try and do. Let's cut to the chase, and just like completely just cut him off at the legs.
Like what
And he
she
would
did
just be
with
like,
Q, where she's like,
Yeah.
no, Q, fuck you, we don't have the time.
Yes,
Your cue
we're
shit.
too tired for your bullshit.
I love that part.
Anybody else?
Yeah. Obviously, like the main guy who wants to come back is Garak. We want to know what happened to Garak.
It would be funnier if like Mariner got an outfit that was tailored by Garak, and it was actually like legitimately.
Yes.
She's like, "Oh, that guy's my tailor." Like that would be the funniest thing if she doesn't bring up anything about him being Cardassian or any like shady shit, and it's just like, "No, that dude's legit my tailor."
I love that idea.
That would be amazing.
So I was
Like,
also
man,
going to
make it
say
happen.
I was going to say Garak as well. I think we're actually out of Cardassians.
I think
Are
we
we?
kind of
Gul
are.
Dukat?
Like in
All the
terms
goals,
of
really.
like in terms of the storyline, like I would just love to know more about that guy. He's so intriguing, right? And if somehow in Lower Decks they decided to dig deeper into his past or something, that would be pretty cool.
I would love if they confirmed him to be gay. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, he's dating Bashir." I'd be like, "I knew it."
The
Not really.
Cerritos docks at Deep Space Nine. That would be such a cool episode.
Right? I mean, it would probably happen. It could happen.
I mean, there's going to be time, and it takes place within the same time frame, right?
Mhm.
Like it's like after Voyager, right?
Yeah.
It's somewhere around.
It's
I thought it
around
was
there. Well, I
TNG
mean, because
time,
like,
right?
yeah,
They make
it's
Voyager
Because
references.
stuff they-
Riker's on the Titan, so it's
Riker's
after
on the Titan.
next
Yeah.
gen, right?
yeah.
it's-
So
Yeah,
the
it's after
main
TNG,
problem with
right?
Dukat coming back is he's kind of dead at this point.
That's not stopping anybody.
You could
This is
have a
animation.
Ducati cat.
He's a Paul
Maybe.
Wraith now. He can come back and do whatever he wants.
Oh my
Ooh,
god.
there you go. How about you, Brittany?
Max. R.I.P. Did everybody answer? I feel like we did.
Yeah, do you have one, Britt?
Oh, I just said I would like Garak the most, and I would just love it to be that way that it doesn't bring up any of his, shady Cardassian stuff.
Yeah.
Literally, it's like his whole "I'm a simple tailor" line, and it's like, no, he's
Just
actually
that.
a tailor.
No more questions.
No more
Is he the one who made the Vindicta outfit for Mariner?
I'd believe it.
I'm here for it.
Might
Yeah.
as well. Yeah. He'd probably be like, wear the makeup, put on the eyeliner.
Vindicta!
Vindicta! Oh, man,
Speaking,
I can't wait for that
speaking
show.
of Garak, there was a video released recently, and then him and Andy Robinson and Alexander Siddig did basically a little table read of like a Bashir and Garak.
Like a fanfic.
It's basically like that. Yeah, Dax pointed it out on the Discord, and that
God.
he sent a video for it, and it's pretty funny. They're
You know
basically
what,
just
May?
they're basically just an elderly couple now, just bickering over nonsense.
Oh, I love it.
Giving the fans what they want.
You know who else is going to give the fans what they want? Hawk is, because he's going to tell us about, lightly, just gently, the occupation of Bajor and the introduction to DS9.
All right,
Are you?
so
Are you? Maybe.
I am, yeah. The occupation of Bajor. DS9, as we know, takes place after the occupation of Bajor, in which the Cardassian government took control over Bajor, establishing an occupational government and committing genocide against the Bajoran people while using their slave labor to mine for resources the military needed. The brutality, the brutality of the Cardassian military drove many in the previously mollified Bajoran populace to form a ferocious resistance, a member of which was Kieran Aris, our main character from DS9, the first officer of the space station under Benjamin Sisko. Operating on guerrilla and terrorist tactics, the resistance constantly harried the Cardassian forces.
They Harry Kimmed them.
Yes, they did.
They harried them.
With the constant attacks by the Bajoran resistance and facing pressure from both the internal civilian elements in the Cardassian Central Command and the Federation, the Cardassians eventually withdrew from Bajor. DS9 is a space station that is jointly operated by the Federation and Bajoran government. The show centers on the Federation, the Bajoran government, and the Cardassian government's interactions post-occupation, and trying to prevent any new conflict while dealing with the lingering resentment between the Cardassian and the Bajoran people.
Bum, bum, bum. Doesn't that just make everybody want to watch DS9 right now?
Yes, very
I
much.
wrote that myself.
Well,
That's a
hopefully they
gr-
watched all 5 episodes that we're going to talk about. Otherwise, what are they doing with their lives?
Yeah,
think
honestly, if anybody ever asks me about Cardassians, I'm like, just watch all of Deep Space Nine. It'll
I
answer
trust-
literally everything.
I trust this community to have watched these episodes 4 or 5 times already.
Right?
Mhm.
Half the time they honestly, sometimes I'm like, why am I hosting? Like, some of these people have seen these episodes more than me. Like, I love Deep Space Nine, but I love
No, you
Duet, but
love
I've
it,
only seen
that's
it
why.
like 3 times. Speaking of Duet, I'll get us started off. So, just so the audience knows, of course, watch all of Deep Space Nine. We didn't pick these specific episodes because, they are the end-all, be-all of Cardassian things. Like, to each their own. You can watch any episodes or watch the whole series and you'll get something out of it. But we just picked some, standout ones that bring up specific themes or ones that we really like. So, they're in order of seasons. It'll make it easier for you if you want to watch later. First up is Duet from Season 1. It's Season 1, Episode 18, which kind of deals with the occupation of Bajor. ultimately the atrocities and genocide that happened there, and kind of the idea of bringing these war criminals to justice, which is one of those things that you're like, yeah, that's great. We love in real life when war criminals are brought to justice. And we'll see how it plays out here. So I started out each section with a different like quote from the episodes we're talking about, and mine refers to this amazing background behind me. You can't really see it, but Kira's holding a Cardassian man as he's dying, which is the dramatic end to this episode. So Kira screams at me, why? He wasn't Darhiel, why? And the man Kanan, who kills Maritza in the end, says, he's Cardassian, that's reason enough. And she goes, no, it's not. Which is a big deal because this is Kira Nerys,
For her, it's huge.
woman
yeah.
of the Resistance, and this is only season 1, and she's already growing. So
Yeah, this
props
whole
to
show
her.
is about her growth and her prejudices, right? And how she's sort of worked past them.
Yep. So, synopsis for this episode. After a Cardassian man arrives on the station suffering from an illness that he could only have contracted at a Bajoran labor camp during the occupation, Major Kira leads an investigation to determine whether he's actually a notorious war criminal. I know that sounds weird, but hang in there with us, guys, because this dude changed his face. So, as we mentioned, it's a particularly powerful episode for Kira because this is the first time her viewpoint is really challenged in the show, other than just butting heads with Cisco here and there and, dealing with more religious things. But this is when it really comes to a front with like her history with Cardassians and we know what she's been through sort of thing. And we begin the episode basically trusting her judgment. Immediately when we see that this dude's a Cardassian and we hear he could only have gotten this illness being at a labor camp, we know, okay, if you're a Cardassian at a labor camp, Nazi at a concentration camp, we know you were up to no good, that sort of thing. So yeah, we're immediately against him, but us, just like Kira, because she has such an empathy with her as well, when she finally realizes that Maritza is trying to do this really noble deed in a way of bringing a terrible war criminal who died and got out scot-free from all of his crimes, bringing him to justice and at least seeing justice being served by pretending to be him, and because he doesn't want to go on living his life being a coward, she realizes that she becomes more concerned with learning the truth about why he's doing what he's doing, rather than seeking vengeance, like Jadzia tries to nicely suggest to her early in the episode. So,
I mean, it's a crazy episode. It's clearly about, Nazis and the Holocaust and concentration camps. And I think it's almost, even now, I mean, forever. It's hard to watch things like that because that's the parallel is there. And I like that the episode, makes you, it doesn't make you question things, but it makes you think, because even for me, I'm not Jewish, but I just think that, he might have just been a file clerk, but even to me, I'm like, well, fuck that guy anyway, because he was part of it. And he does do this noble thing at the end, and obviously he does find it, horrible and distasteful. Distasteful is not even the right word, but there's a part of me that's like, man, like you were still part of it, like it's really dark. I guess
it is.
I liked it because it didn't, there wasn't like a real happy ending. It just one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, this was awful, so there you go.
This was real life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really kind of played with the whole idea of the Nuremberg defense and that when, Nazi war criminals were brought to trial at The Hague and that, and said like, I was only responsible for this part. I was only responsible for that part, and we, it was so easy for us to assume that, it's like that, they did it without, I'm losing my train of thought here, but
I know what you mean.
yeah,
Like they're just as
culpable. They're as complicit as anybody else in making the mechanics of this thing go along. But this episode really kind of takes us behind the scenes where there maybe some of these people in that hated what they were doing, and they were lived under the same fears of being killed, because it was either compliance or death in these situations, and
especially
with this
when they're all conscripted into the military, like he said, where it's just like, I'm a file clerk who had to do this because the military. But the way he talks about himself in the third person when he's pretending to be Darhiel really shows you how he views himself as well. So he's like, I'm like lower than scum. Like these foul clerks, these cowards, everything, and you're like, okay, yeah, we get it, you were a coward, but damn, man.
I know, but that was what was so amazing about it, is like he was so intent on punishing himself and that he wanted to give like Kira and the Bajoran people and that, exactly what they wanted in like their war criminal and that, even though it was a chase, it was so clever in that, because they had to chase down every aspect to confirm his story and to, find out who he was and that. But like at the end, when he started monologuing and that about like what the atrocities and how much like Darheel enjoyed it and like wanted to do more, he should have killed everybody that was there instead of just leaving, and that he was giving them exactly the kind of criminal that they wanted, justice for them.
Yeah.
What I like about the Cardassians is that they really took like an enemy in the Star Trek universe and made it way more complex and multidimensional than I think a lot of the enemy races or whatever that we've seen in previous Star Trek shows. Like, I mean, the Klingons, for example, are very one-dimensional, I find. Like, I know they try to add other aspects of culture to the Klingons, and I remember one of the books that I had when I was a kid was the Klingon the Klingon English dictionary to sort of teach you how to speak Klingon.
Yeah.
And there's sections in that book where it teaches you a little bit about how to order things at a Klingon restaurant and Klingon culture. And I was like, oh, that's interesting that they're trying to come up with
That's
a little
cute.
bit more. Yeah. And so for something like the Cardassians, I always felt that they seemed so much more complex. And when you see that they're not all looking for honor and glory the way that the Klingons were, and they're not all sort of sneaking around the way that we see the Romulans.
Yeah.
There's a lot more going on with the Cardassians, and I think this episode sort of showcases that pretty well.
Yeah, they seem pretty fleshed out individually. Like, there's a lot of times you see these groups where you're like, okay, this, specific race, this is how they are about their culture. And while you can still see that about Cardassians, Deep Space Nine showed that straight up they're like, these horrible people did this occupation, but also there's individual ones where like, this one's duplicitous, this one has these motives, this one is moving on past the occupation, this one wasn't involved in it, but like is being treated this way by Bajorans. It's all over the place. Where like you want so bad to be like, as soon as they pop up, to be like, space Nazi, can't trust you. But then sometimes you're like, oh god, what does he have to say? What does this entail? So they even begrudgingly work with them, which we'll see in later episodes. So like Hawk said, Maritza / Darheel at times seemed to be everything that Kira and the Bajorans wanted him to be. The man at the top who basically ran the feared labor camp, oversaw all these atrocities, was a huge zealot who epitomized the Cardassians' hatred of the Bajorans and reveled in what he'd done. But when his true identity was revealed, we see a person who really is obviously suffering from what we would determine to be survivor's guilt. And he wasn't a survivor in the sense that he was in the forced labor camp, but the fact that he was complicit in this horrible thing that was happening and was, keeping track of those numbers. He knows exactly what they did. He heard the screams. What do we feel about this reveal? Like, especially if it was your first time watching it, like every time I watch it, even though I know it's coming, it's still very powerful for me, I found.
I mean,
Yeah.
it just feels like normal Cardassian bullshit to me. Like he's doing this thing that is, the right thing to do. But God, he's doing it in such a Cardassian way. Like,
Oh, yeah.
all right, I
He
gotta
couldn't
figure
just
out
straight
these
up say,
records.
yeah.
Like, I gotta put this information here. I gotta make this look like this. I'm gonna change my Can Cardassians just show up and just tell them what's happening? Like, they have to make a whole
But I
play
feel
out of
like
it.
the only reason he had to was because he was a lowly file clerk
Totally.
who would never be put up for any of this. But he was like, there was a really bad guy I worked for who I really want to finally go, like, be served this justice, or for the people to be served justice against him. And he's like, but he's dead.
Agree, but it
So-
just cracks me up that it is so Cardassian. Like, we talk about
Yeah,
there
it's
being
very
different
dramatic.
types of Cardassians, but listen, at the end of the line, Cardassian as fuck.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love the layers too, though, because the episodes just the initial watch, you're just kind of like, you think you know what's happening, and then you're like, wait a minute, and you're like, is it what I think it is? And then when it is, you're like, aha, now I got it. And then there's like the third twist, and you're just like, Jesus.
What was I gonna say? Oh, all praise to all praise to Harris Yulin, who was the guy who played Maritza. He's a veteran character actor. You've probably seen him in dozens of things and that. lost the train of
It's
thought.
there. It's there, Hawk.
I
It's
know.
gonna
I'm
come
trying to
back
find.
you.
Is it how he and Kira play off each other in those moments? Because I love their
All the-
head-to-heads are some of the best things.
all their dialogue together was great. God, I just had it and I lost it.
Should we go to Michael real quick and then we'll swing back to you?
Good call.
All right, Michael,
Yeah.
hit us.
Sorry, what you guys cut out for a second. What were you asking?
I was
Oh, we were just seeing if
I
you
said
had
you
any
were up.
thoughts on like the whole like the reveals that happened and like how you felt. If it was your initial view, for example, like I always remember how I felt the first time I saw this episode. Because now I'm just like, oh, Duet's a good one. Let's watch it. And then I'm like crying by the end. But
Mhm.
the first time I was just like, holy shit, this show's dark.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's the same kind of thing with me. Like it's not what I've expected from a Star Trek show, and like especially knowing that Deep Space Nine was way more like wide story arc than Next Generation or anything prior to it. Getting into some of these darker themes, like especially with some of these reveals, like I didn't expect that the writers were going to go there. I thought that everything, at least the way that we've seen Star Trek up to that point, was fairly black and white. It was and so seeing that they were trying to keep the audience guessing, and they were trying to keep us a little bit less comfortable with our sort of preconceived notions about what to expect from these characters, whether it be the Cardassians or even some of the characters that we see week to week in that show. It's yeah.
No, that pretty much sums it up. I agree.
That
Hawk,
seemed to
did you
be like
remember what you needed?
no, just to play on what Schaus said, that seemed to be like a consistent theme throughout DS9 is to take people way out of their comfort zones and that, whereas like TNG used to do some really challenging things in that as far as like, getting people to think about certain issues and that, but like DS9 consistently like would challenge people's views on everything from like race and that to
Yeah, what was that
sexuality.
episode called? Across the Stars or something? What was that episode where they looked at the racism stuff and
Oh, the one where he goes back in time?
yeah,
Yeah,
where
what is that
Cisco was a
called?
science fiction writer.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't remember the name, but I don't know any names of episodes really. If people
But-
explain the plot, I'm like, I've seen it.
I'm probably misremembering the name of the episode, but
Yeah.
yeah, that kind of thing.
But
Like
yeah, that one.
suddenly all of the characters, they don't have their makeup on anymore. They're all playing
Yeah.
different characters, and you're like, whoa, this is a Star Trek episode. What what are we doing here?
Exactly.
was really
I love
cool.
Deep Space Nine for those things, and that's all I tell people is something. It's a deep show. Watch it. It's in the name. So we won't focus too much on the atrocities specifically that are committed because one, that's depressing, and everybody is already depressed about real life genocide. And two, if we are gonna focus on that, it would be largely involving if we're doing like a Bajoran specific episode where we're talking about the occupation and talking about how they balance their religion with these horrible things that have happened to them, etc. But that being said, how powerful was it to have this episode where a Bajoran and a Cardassian were discussing the atrocities that basically gave us our first major glimpse into the occupation? Because like things had been mentioned so far in season 1, but not in this detail and not with this level of like emotion that was going head to head, where she was calling him out on like, this is what you did to my people, I lived it, and he's like, well, you were in the resistance, and she's like, how could you know that, blah blah blah, back and forth. So even if Maritza, when he was pretending to be Darheel, was dismissing it at first because he just wanted to be put on trial and killed, like he kept being like, I don't know what you're talking about, to look really suspicious so that he'd be killed. Like when he finally really does get into the character with Darheel and lays it all out, and then when he breaks down and says that I had to lay hearing the screams at night and like I was a coward and I cried myself to sleep because I couldn't bring myself to do anything, like, not that I'm sympathizing or saying I'm okay with these things, this is just what happened in the show.
No, but that's
how
the
do we
whole
feel
thing with the
seeing that?
that's the whole thing with survivor's guilt and that is like you don't have to be the one who was who had the torture inflicted upon them. And it's another thing, that's why the Cardassians are such kind of multi-layered characters in that even going back to their introduction back in TNG and that episode where the guy goes off the rails and that starts hunting down Cardassian ships and that we kind of got to see the war from different perspectives of the Cardassians who were on the ship. There was a guy in the bar and that talking to O'Brien and that, and he seemed to have a lot of regrets in that. They're not a species that's just consigned to groupthink in plot writing and that. The writers in these shows seem to take the time to go into their interior lives and that, and how it's like they were individually affected by this. And this is just another episode where it's like the writers really got to explore a pretty largely unwritten, character
Yeah.
species in the show, and got to play with this.
And it kind of comes down to, it's that whole idea of like, it's always a moral thing, with Star Trek, especially in deep episodes like this, where it's, can somebody who played a part in the suffering of others, regardless of how low of a level it was or how high it was, in this case, a coward who stood aside and let it happen, rather than, die for a cause or try to stand up to it in whatever way he could, can they be pitied for their own suffering, or like how do we like judge that in a scope or scale? And the thing is, everybody has different experiences, everybody has different biases and different sort of preconceived notions towards things. So it's just an interesting moral that it like puts out there, or like an interesting idea that all of us right now could have different reactions to it. Just the same way that in the beginning of the episode, right away you're like, this dude's guilty, kill him. Kira is not okay with this. And then by the end of the episode, you find yourself like Kira, where you're like, dang, this is messed up. While I'm like, still like, this guy died and he was involved in these things. You're just like, it's kind of messed up that this dude just stabbed him out of nowhere in the middle of a promenade when he was going to help try and make Cardassia better. Like, he has the unique position where someone like him who understands the things were wrong with the occupation could have helped create a better society of more empathetic people that wouldn't allow it to happen again. So it's like,
could
you
he,
feel
though?
a loss at
He
the
wasn't
end.
really in a good position for that at the end.
But
I mean,
that's what Kira was discussing with him at literally while they were walking, was like, Cardassian needs more people like you. That's why she was so, she when she found out what he was doing, she's like, I like understand what you're doing and why. And like, the fact that he was willing, like, obviously he just wanted to die from what happened, but she was like, the fact that you were going to do this to give me a sense of justice, because he searched her ahead of time. He looked specifically for her, and by extension, some of the Bajoran people, some form of justice. Like, Kira is a hardcore character. Like, she would feel more than any of us in any state. But the fact that by the end of the episode, she felt such emotion for his loss was, like, the whole show, you're like, we want these two groups to eventually grow to some sort of understanding together. And she's just like, well, we lost a okay one by the end,
an okay one, I think, is about,
yeah, like, I'll never say he's like a
where you
good
can
person or a
land.
hero.
But
Yeah.
wouldn't have he have served it better in that, to go out and be able to tell a story and say, like, what we did was wrong,
Yeah.
But
To be like more of a whistleblower sort of thing.
I mean, it
but
would
he
be
doesn't get the
slightly
chance.
better.
Yeah,
I'm
would've been
definitely
slightly
like,
better.
I think I just like, because all I can see is Nazis. I'm like, well, he was still a Nazi. But yeah, on a scale of
And none of
this
us are arguing
bad,
that.
he's like right there,
Yeah. But watch all of Deep Space Nine, then come back to me with all your thoughts. Because man, is it a wild ride. So yeah, the episode ends with that death, which is, kind of shocking, but not so shocking in the fact that you don't see it as possibly occurring. Like, you get the vibes and the tensions that, the man is next to him in the jail cell and is like, I can't believe I'm in a cell next to this person. So the resentment and hatred is there, and it starts in season 1 and just keeps growing throughout the series. So what do you think Maritza might have been able to have done had he not been killed? Would he have done a more diplomatic route with like what Kira was suggesting, or do you think he just would have lived a life of like a coward solitude? Like, do you think this would have maybe changed him or not?
He definitely, I don't know, like, not changed him, but it, as I said, that maybe even just him being able to tell his story, would have affected change.
I think he was too far gone.
Yeah, I just don't see, because he's not like a known person. He doesn't have a position of authority. Like, it's good for someone to tell a story, but like, especially within Cardassian, like in Cardassia, like, where's that story gonna go, and who's he gonna get to before they just arrest his ass and throw him in jail for like talking against the Empire? I think that story would probably be told maybe in the Federation, but I think what he tried to do was
would have been more powerful.
Well, I mean, fucked up, but sure. But like, I just think that in the end, him dying isn't much more than I think he could have done staying alive. Like, I don't know that he had anywhere to really go.
For me, it's like the fact that he was such a lowly status of a character what he tried to do in impersonating this really terrible person and who was a significant person of power, literally was awarded honors and all these other things for the fucked up stuff that they did in Bajor. If that would have been able to happen, if had that man not died and he impersonated him and like went to trial and then died, that would have been like a shock and a half to like the Cardassians, like their military and their council and everything. You know, if he would have been brought to justice in some way, in that form. But I do think that like they do it for a reason where they have him die, and it's just kind of like that one thing of like it's that what if thought, or like every time there's a chance at something changing or ideas being brought up that conflict against, you know, what Cardassians have thought for such a long time. It's like if we have more and more people that go back and they're like, you know what, the occupation wasn't okay, even if they were involved in it or not, they're just like, that shouldn't have happened. It's just more and more to conflict with that militaristic thinking.
When you say what if, my first thought is like, okay, Star Trek, they're going to go ahead and get an animated series together, and they're going to do all these offshoots, and we can find out what happened. Boom.
Right?
That's not being done
Section
by anyone
31.
right now.
Yeah. What hasn't been done in comic form for literally 50 years. So anyway, any final thoughts on this episode? If not, we're moving on, because I guess I took too long on that one, so I'm going to have to
I think it was the best of the bunch.
It was a good episode.
Really?
It's my favorite
Yeah.
of the bunch, for sure.
And one of the strongest of season 1 for sure.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
it sticks with you. Like you still
What,
think
not
about
Alan
it like when you
Moraine?
think of DS9. Jesus.
Alan Moraine, the greatest episode of DS9.
Move along home.
Okay. Who wants to do the Cardassians? Because I don't want to like hog the talking the whole time. I have it written out on the outline.
The Cardassians. I will read the
Cardassians.
Cardassians. The
2X5.
Kardashians. Which is, season 2, episode 5. I accidentally, by the way, when I was going to do my watch of all the episodes, read this wrong. I thought it said 225, and I went ahead and watched one, but it was like O'Brien, the one where he gets tortured by the Cardassians and like put up as a criminal. Yeah, so I saw more, but then I went back and watched this one.
She's like, dang, poor O'Brien.
It's a good episode too, though.
I like that it is a really good episode. I like that Brittany's notes in this for this episode say war orphans, more shady Cardassian shit, Bajor and VO Cardassians.
I just like to vaguely write the themes that it touched upon, you know.
I like it, man.
Sometimes
it's
I'm
on
more
point.
scholarly in my approach. Other times I'm exhausted and just write funny stuff in the outline.
Hey, I think it adds personality. The quote you have here is, what's the character's name? Rugal? I forget how they say it.
Rugal.
Yeah,
Rugal.
little kid.
And he said, I wish I wasn't Cardassian, which, you know, that tells you everything you need to know. But I'm going to tell you a little more. The synopsis for this episode is, after seeing a Bajoran father with a Cardassian son, Garak and the doctor, I just watched Voyager. It's messing
You're
me
right.
up. Garak and Dr. Bashir investigate abandoned Cardassian war orphans on Bajor. So this episode, it
starts with a bite.
Yeah, it sure does. And I mean, I think it's interesting because it's not about you know, it's like two cultures clashing, and there's almost sort of like a brainwashing element to it. There's a lot going on in this one. Rugal being raised by Bajorans gives him a unique perspective as a Cardassian. He hates Cardassians for what they did during the occupation and does not want to return to Cardassia to be with his dad, his biological father. And what did you guys think of Rugal's character and, you know, him being, you know, like a child of two worlds, and of course, biting Garak's hand?
I think it's a great way to open an episode right away for like, because, you know, like Bashir's literally there to like try to like test out the vibes with Garak to be like, can we really trust you? I kind of like this friendship, but I don't know what it is. And the fact that Garak just goes over and like they both look at the same time. They're like, have you ever seen that before? Like a Cardassian kid wearing like a Bajoran like earring thing, and he's just like, yeah. So he's just like, that's weird. And like with a Bajoran dad, so then he's just like, who's this handsome young whippersnapper? And then right away the kid's just like. Like you don't expect it. You think like some argument's gonna happen, like a fight, or they'd be like, get your Cardassian hands off my son. But like kid just bites him and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
What? It's great. I love it.
Like, how confusing a situation is that gotta be for a kid growing up, like, you know, as a Cardassian on Bajor, and that, you know, it's like you kind of you assimilate, like, you know, the viewpoints of like, you know, your parents and your whoever's raising you, and that, you know, that's kind of natural. And that him biting Garak though, and that it just seemed like, you know, him like trying to, you know, be emphatically more anti-Cardassian than even his Bajoran parents, and that
Mhm.
you know, like
They say don't bite the hand that feeds you. So
It's an emotional
Garak didn't
outburst,
have
right,
food with
of a
him though.
child. Just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's
He just
gut
went
reaction.
feral.
Yeah.
Like
He was hormonal,
yeah,
right?
instead of
And
kicking him in the shin, he was
he
just
was
like space Nazi.
yeah.
But it just leads me to wonder, like, what is his life like on Bajor, and that, you know, as a Cardassian? And
How was he
is, like,
treated? Yeah.
yeah, like he had to be bullied by kids around him, and that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then
I-
I don't know, because Cisco says at the end that he's like really sure that he had such loving parents through the Bajorans. But I'm sure
I
like
get,
learning about everything
yeah,
it just enforced in his mind like Cardassians are terrible, but not me. I'm different, but they're terrible.
exactly. Yeah, I know. I don't doubt that the parents actually, you know, loved him and raised him properly, and that, you know, because you know, even that guy was the one who was feeding like that information about his life on Bajor, and that who just suddenly disappeared, and that I know he was a Cardassian plant.
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
you
So
know,
Gul Dukat obviously finds out about what's going on because Cisco's investigating the children of the Cardassian children who are just like left on Bajor, and Gul Dukat's got to get involved. And what did you guys think about like they go and investigate this, and then there's this whole thing where like they're trying to decide what should happen to this child. Why do you think the Cardassians would just like leave their kids? Because they said it was like they're like children of no status or something like that. Like, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, because they're orphaned and like don't have that familial status in society, they just like begrudgingly left them behind. But I don't know, Gul Dukat right away knew about Rugal like too early, and even
Mhm.
Cisco was like, "What do you want? Why are you calling?" And then he's like, "You need to investigate this. I'm looking into war orphans." And then Cisco's like, "What? War orphans? How?" Can't be trusted. It's all plot.
no,
Always
yeah.
Cardassians.
Well, that's one of the great things about Dukat is, like, you know,
Mhm.
one of the most prominent traits as a villain he has is the way he uses indignities against his own people as these opportunities for leverage, if it either with the Federation or occasionally against the Cardassians themselves. In this one, he saw an opportunity while trying to organize the withdrawal from Bajor, and that to try and take down a rival, you know,
Mhm.
and act upon it. That what was I going to say?
Sometimes they just steal kids. They do it in real life too. And then they register them in these school systems. We all know about it. It's just not good stuff. So,
But
should the Cardassian kids have been left behind? No. Were they for a reason? In this case, specifically this kid? Yeah.
this kid specifically, yeah, but I think with the other kids, because they do mention that, you know, during the withdrawal and that there was another attack in that, right? So I think
Mhm.
like these children were pretty much displaced in that because of the
Mhm.
attack, and just left behind.
Yeah,
Not,
their parents would have been killed in that attack, right?
Yeah. So they were just like, well, we're leaving with our forces. Good luck, kids. The Bajorans will take care of you. You're fine. Even though we deem them as lesser beings.
I mean, it is something I think to take in a child who looks very different from you and is a different species and of the people who have been oppressing you. I think that even, we see that that kid is raised to hate his own people, and that, there's something there it's not perfect or anything, but I
Mhm.
think it does take a lot for someone to like take someone into their home like that. I think that part is, there's something good there.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's an
Yeah,
enormous commitment, and when you actually raise that person with love and that, I mean, it, you know,
exactly. And the
Yeah.
fact that they, like you said, raised him with love and, brought him into their culture in like a forgiving way, even though they still had to teach about what happened and it did make him like resentful and hateful even towards his own biological father that didn't really have anything to do with like he didn't leave him behind or anything like that. Um oh my god, my mind went blank like Hawk. What just happened?
Do you think that because we were just talking about Maritza or whatever the hell his name was,
Mhm.
I think that this child, he goes back to Cardassia, has more of a opportunity, I think,
Mhm.
because he's still young growing up, depending on where he goes in life, because he's had this experience as a child to become, I think, more someone who could influence.
That just reminded me of like literally what I was gonna say. So I was gonna bring up that the generation of kids that you're seeing, like even in TNG, when you see the daughter of the guy that's like torturing Picard, And it's the same case here. You see these Cardassian children, and you see that Cardassians are capable of love and affection to certain things in a certain way towards their children. And the fact that you have like Dukat's daughter, which we'll talk about later on, and then Rugal in this case, they symbolize that next generation that are going to like, they'll be the ones that bridge that gap, that heal the wrongs. Because the thing is, the kids aren't responsible for what the people before them did. Yeah. It's really terrible. They'll understand, they'll feel bad about it. They'll have maybe survivor's guilt if they survived the war as, orphans or etc. But they'll find a way to heal things in a way that their parents totally messed up, or their grandparents and so on. So I like that vibe that you're like, we believe in Rugal.
Well, the Cardassians are in the Federation in the 31st century or whatever the fuck, so it got better.
Right? It got worse, but then it got better. Maquis. What?
There's an interesting aspect of Cardassians that was brought up in this episode, and that is how much they prize family. When O'Brien and Kotan Padar and that, who Rugal's biological father and that, when they meet in that, Padar instructs O'Brien on the dynamics of Cardassian family, and that 4 generations of a family will all eat at the same table, and that, but it's bizarre because it's also kind of contradicted by the fact that any child with no family and no parents who's an orphan and that has absolutely no status within Cardassian society.
Well, also in this episode, we see a little bit more between Bashir and Garak, which is like everybody's favorite pairing. And
everybody loves to see it.
Yeah, it's sort of like one of their, like an early starting point of their friendship. And Garak even lets Bashir know some stuff that Gul Dukat's into. And Bashir's still trying to like figure him out. Is he a spy? Is he not a spy? And I thought that was something that felt nice for them to put in here in an organic way, because sometimes they force these characters together and stuff and you're like, this makes no sense. But
like random team up.
yeah, it's just like, this episode will work, but it felt like it was part of the story, and it's natural because Garak is Cardassian, and I thought it was a nice way to move their friendship forward. Did you guys feel that way? Schaus, we haven't heard from you in a while. What do you think about that?
I really love that relationship between those two characters and how it sort of grew throughout the entirety of Deep Space Nine. And it was great because at the beginning, you're right, he was trying to figure out sort of what Garak's motives were, but I don't think it mattered. And I think the friendship just kind of was there regardless of what his motives were. And so I could see that as when they were working on the show, when they were planning out the show, they sort of had this idea that that's where they wanted that relationship to go. At least it felt that way to me as I was sort of watching through the seasons, that it didn't seem like it was tacked on at the end. Like it seemed like they sort of had a plan for what they wanted to do with Bashir and Garak. So it was like in these early episodes in the first couple of seasons, like to see sort of that dynamic and watch it as it kind of grew to like, I'm thinking of one of my favorite episodes where Bashir was the spy, the James Bond episode.
Yes, our man
right?
Bashir.
Our man Bashir.
Oh look, I knew a title.
There you go. Yeah, like that's one of my favorites, and the the dynamic between those two as sort of spies and everything, where Bashir was sort of going into like the Earth spy world and taking Garak with him. It's kind of like it took it kind of full circle. So yeah, I like how everything started off here and where it went from there.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite dynamics in DS9. Like I love the core cast for sure, but the fact that like Bashir also gets this like side friendship with Garak, and then like Garak becomes more prominent, and like such an interesting character. We bring up Garak every single time we talk about like side characters or like Cardassians and anything. And it is brought up so naturally in this episode. Like it doesn't feel like it's like, oh, Sisko's ordering us to go do this and we're being paired up and we're like unlikely buddies, whatever. Like it's not like a Tuvok Neelix like situation where you're like, we low-key hate each other, but we have
Tuvix.
some respect for each other. Well, not like that. That's a little too close.
Actually,
but
this
like,
episode
it works, you know? Go ahead.
This episode was actually a great one for Bashir in that, because I get the impression early on that in the series and that Cisco didn't really take Bashir very seriously as a person, or as not
Nobody did in the first season,
no.
even
Oh
audience.
yeah.
But for some reason Garak takes a liking to him in that, and this seems and even though we don't really know his motives in that, because like we know like he hates Gul Dukat. We don't know exactly why in that, but he did want to screw him
But
over
we're
in
like,
that.
we also hate Gul Dukat, so Garrick's
Yes.
right.
But this, when presented with an opportunity in that to maybe hoist him on his own petard and that he brings Bashir along with him for the ride and that, and it ends up like Bashir actually ends up his status it was elevated a bit by this, especially coming in at the end and saying like Gul Dukat.
Yep. I love when he calls him out and interrupts Cisco.
Oh,
Like,
great.
Good.
Oh, sorry, you got it. Good.
Oh, I was just gonna say, because it's so like out of the ordinary for Bashir to do to Cisco, and it also shows you how much he trusts Garak already, even though he knows that Garak literally tells him, "I don't believe in truth. Like, truth doesn't exist. Like, everything's always a lie. Like, don't believe me." And he's just like, "Only a true truther would tell someone that." And you're like, Bashir, don't trust him. But he does. And the fact that he walks in and he asks like Dukat about stuff, and he's like, "Then why did you leave them behind if you were in charge?" And he was just like, "Oh." And then Cisco's like, "I like what you did. Don't do it again. Don't you ever fucking do that again." And you're just like, "Oh, he got in trouble because of Garak." True friendship.
I think that it's a much better look for Julian in the first season, because in the first like 2 seasons, a lot of his looks are like a little sexual predatory. I let's be honest. Like he's just like
Oh, yeah,
aggressively going after women.
When they
And
stopped having him Mac on Dax, that's when he gets better.
ugh.
Yes.
But yeah, this was nice. And I also feel like Garak comes for him, not comes for him. I think
Eyebrow
he takes
wiggle.
an interest in him because he's young and he's malleable.
Mhm.
And I
He's so
think
full of
that,
enthusiasm.
Mhm.
yes. And I think in the beginning he does it because he's probably bored. Like he's like, oh, this is like a little Starfleet toy I can play with. But I think it develops into a friendship and respect. But I think everything he's doing there, and Bashir goes and talks to Cisco, like you say, he's sort of like making that, not making it happen, but he's sort of like mentoring Julian without Julian really knowing it. And I think it's all just kind of part of it, part of it is he's got his own agenda, but I think a little bit of it is amusement. And then it, like you guys said, it like grows season to season into something that's more
It
mutual.
blossoms into a beautiful friendship.
Yes, it does.
Something more they never confirm.
But just to, wrap this episode up, did you guys like the way that it ended with the child going back to Cardassia, or do you feel it should have gone a different way?
This one's always a hard ending for me, because like I like the character of Rugal, and like it's very sad to see that like he's being taken from a loving family where he grew up. I understand why, because like if you were to hear objectively of like a child, being taken as a kid, given to another family, and then like their real family finds out they're still alive, you'd be like, "Oh, well, please give them back to their original family." But like the Bajorans didn't kidnap him, like he was literally like became their like foster kid. So it's so conflicting, because you're like, I get, and I hope that it ends up being a good life for him, but at the same time it's like, what if he's miserable? What if he never gets along with his dad? And what if he took this really positive sort of relationship from him? So I just kind of finished the episode, I'm like, dang, that was rough. So I just
Yeah.
I'm always conflicted about the ending. I'm not sure what I like.
Like, what if he's shunned on Cardassia? Like, because he was raised by Bajorans, like he could have a miserable experience there, not just with his family, but with anything he tries to do. Like if he tries to get into a career somewhere, he tries to do something. Sure, he has his father and his father's position, but at the same time, he might, people may not want to associate with him because of his connection with the Bajorans and sort of that relationship between those species, right?
Sure, the first time he walks out onto Cardassian streets and that wearing a Bajoran earring.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that'll turn some heads.
And will he be willing to give all that up?
Right? About this. Sorry, what?
And Julian, insert press of the button.
Get off my bridge.
Well, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Brittany so we can go on to the next episode, the Maquis.
Yeah, unless anybody else wants to read. Final offer. You got 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1.
I'll read. I can
Go,
read.
Hawk.
Yeah. So the Maquis episode 2x20 introduction of the Maquis, not really the introduction, but more further exploration of them in that resistance. Do ends justify means. So on a quote from Cisco, on Earth, there is no poverty, no crime, no war. You look out the window of Starfleet headquarters and you see paradise. Well, it's easy to be a saint in paradise, but the Maquis do not live in paradise. Out there in the demilitarized zone, all the problems haven't been solved yet. Out there are no saints, just people. Angry, scared, determined people who are going to do whatever it takes to survive, whether it meets with Federation approval or not.
Such a great speech.
I feel like that sums up the Maquis situation so well. Because he's
So-
just like, it's bound to happen.
It really does. He understands it, even like even if this is his first introduction to the Maquis, he understands them better than any other Starfleet officer does.
Yeah.
So
And
in
then
the
we get into Eddington later, right? Is that his name, Eddington?
The other captain? Or
No, the security guard, the security officer who ends up betraying Cisco,
Oh, probably. I don't remember the names.
the one who ended up being a Maquis guy. Trying to remember what the name is. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I'm trying to see what episode it was in. Yeah,
So-
Michael Eddington, you're right. You're
Yes.
right.
good,
Okay.
good
How did I
name
forget his
recall.
name?
Damn.
nice one.
And you're the one who's like, I haven't rewatched episodes in a while. Like, I need to do a DS9 rewatch. I'm getting
Promotion.
rusty.
Oh yeah, because the whole thing with Eddington, like you see, Cisco takes a personal connection with the Maquis because of what Eddington does to Cisco, and then that whole awesome episode where Cisco basically goes on a revenge hunt with the Defiant to try to get Eddington. Oh, such a good episode.
the
Anyway, yeah.
Defiant.
Sorry, we went off a little bit of a tangent there. Keep going.
No worries.
We love
No
tangents
worries.
on this pod.
Awesome.
Yeah. So synopsis: when a Cardassian freighter explodes at Deep Space Nine, the Cardassians blame Federation colonists in the new demilitarized zone. Beginning the episode with a sudden ship explosion / obvious tampering, and having it be a two-parter filled with espionage. How do we feel about this introduction to the Maquis in this series?
I mean, I liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that it's kind of like you're not expecting it because the episode's like, you're used to like not really cold opens before the intro, but like a generic intro to like, you can name out any Voyager episode. This is going to happen or this is going to happen, and then boom, title, and then continue. So for DS9, it's basically the same thing. It's like, oh, what are the Cardassians doing? What is this going to happen? But this episode starts out, it's just like Dax and Kira talking about like date night and stuff
Oh, yeah.
happening.
By the
And then-
way, why are they the air traffic controllers? Like, is that what they're also doing? There's not someone who's
Oh,
doing.
they always do that on the side. Literally any moment they're not doing their own like main character stuff. Like I love DS9, but sometimes they didn't give the women enough to do when it wasn't just their episode.
Yeah,
So like
that feels
literally
like
they'll just be
should
like,
be someone else's job.
they do everything. I love it. But yeah, then Dax realizes they're like, wait, something, your levels are wrong, and the ship just explodes, and you're like, what? Why? And it's tampering. Because that stuff
course.
doesn't just happen.
We saw
on
that
set.
guy going beep boop boop.
Yeah. Beep, boop, boop, boop.
Can I ask you guys a quick question just about timelines?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Like continuity wise, does this does season 2 of DS9 kind of line up with season 7 of TNG?
Oh, you
Like-
see, this is the stuff I don't know. Because
I'm just wondering, like we're talking about the introduction of the Maquis, and I was just looking it up, like that the
Yeah, I
Maquis
know.
appeared in season 7, right?
We had talked
Yeah,
about this
I think
before,
so.
and that because Ensign Rowe's final episode on TNG was in season 7, and that was
Mhm.
that was really our introduction to the Maquis, and that even though
Yeah.
we
It
didn't
must
really
be
get
around the same time because like the Federation doesn't know about them. Like as far as DS9 is concerned, like Cisco and them, like nobody on the ship knows about the Maquis.
Yeah.
Yet,
So it's just
when it
starting in
happens,
sort
they're
of
like-
both series at the same time, roughly.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
And that admiral was pretty like hand wavy, like the Maquis, who gives a shit,
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
they didn't
weren't
really
like the
consider
threat.
them a
They're
threat.
not the
No.
Maquis to our problems.
Very nice.
They're the solution. Oh man. I liked it though. I like the intrigue.
No, it was good. What was it? Yeah,
There
because
was- Oh no, you go ahead.
okay. Yeah, because this episode, like, to see a Starfleet officer and that, planting an explosive device and that, but this goes back to like, with the Maquis and that, it like, people from Starfleet were quitting their jobs and joining the Maquis and that, that was a very intriguing plot in that, and I'm glad DS9 has decided to follow it up. That the Cardassians, as I said before, the Cardassians are capable of bringing out the worst in everybody in that, and they're probably one of the most divisive enemies in that within Starfleet in that, because people were actually quitting Starfleet in that to join terrorist organizations to fight them.
Okay, so I was initially right. The Maquis episodes aired before Preemptive Strike happened. So this was the introduction of the Maquis. And then, so they were really close together, though. So Maquis, according to our wonderful Twitch viewers, thank you, NY Raleigh and Rob.
Nice.
April 25th and May 2nd. So since it was the 2-part episode in 1994, the year I was born.
Oh my god.
Is when Maquis happened, and then Preemptive Strike was May 16th. So it was really close together. It was like, boom, Maquis. So I
You're a
guess they
Maquis
establish
baby.
who they are, and then they have someone we care about join them. So
I always forgot
That's
these
Brittany.
series ran concurrently.
You were born in
Yeah.
the year of the Maquis.
I was.
Oh, that's your zodiac, the year of the
That's
Maquis.
Yeah, right. What are you, Pisces? No, I'm a Maquis.
That does sound cool.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, because the shows were simultaneous, because with Emissary, the Enterprise was docked at Deep Space Nine, right? The very first episode.
Yeah.
So they really
Got to
wanted to.
see O'Brien transfer.
Yeah.
So anyways, to continue on, it's revealed in this episode that the bomb that destroyed the Bachnor was of Federation origin, and it shows that other people are against the Federation and the Cardassians working together. So our question is, do we like how Sisko handled this new group and situation in these episodes? And did this strengthen or weaken his working relationship with Kira?
I think Sisko does as well as he can in any circumstance.
Mhm.
So he's one of my favorite captains because he can get passionate, but for the most part he stays so level-headed sometimes and really takes the stance of being diplomatic, in the way that Picard does often as well, but to the point where he knows that literally a war can start at any time if he makes the wrong move. So that's why it's so important that his first officer is Kira, and he does rely a lot on her judgment. But this is one of those episodes where you do see them go head to head, and he tells her you have to leave my office. It happens a few other times when Cardassians are involved, because he's you're getting too close to this, you're getting too emotional, you gotta leave, come back to me later. So this is definitely one of those cases where immediately she's it's the Cardassians, they blew up the ship, they want to make us look like we did these things, and he's just there must be another explanation, which sometimes Sisko is wrong about, but I really do like how he handles things in these episodes, because he almost seems like we mentioned, he understands the Maquis and why they would happen and why people would leave because they don't agree with these things. So he's more understanding, not that he supports them in any way, but he just kind of immediately understands this sort of new threat in this zone that he's basically in. So why people would resist and start up all this violence when things are going so well, because he's when things go well, people start shit. So good on Sisko.
It's a difficult situation for anybody
really
in
is.
that. It's a demilitarized zone in that. It's legally it's out of Federation protection in that. It exists within Cardassian borders and that, and it's and the Cardassians kind of agreed, and if they want to stay there, that's their choice and that, but they were also exempt from Federation protection and intervention in that. And as we find out in that, the Cardassians, they weren't particularly happy about these colonists being there, and the fact that they have no protection meant the Cardassians could pretty much bully them as they saw fit.
Yep.
It really helped to show.
Oh, you go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say it really helped to show that the Federation isn't as squeaky clean as it's made out to be, right? Their ships, everything is just gorgeous and clean and shiny, and that goes back to that speech that Sisko gave, about how it's not paradise, not everywhere is in paradise, right? And so you get this glimpse of not everything is perfect in the Star Trek universe, right? And the idea that there are people that are at their wits' end, and things are so bad for them that they're willing to even become enemies of that Federation just to protect themselves.
Defectors will happen, even if you have a utopia. People don't like it, it'll happen.
I thought Cisco handled everything really well, with the exception of the other. I'm not sure if he was a captain or a commander or whatever. The guy who ends up being like in charge of the Maquis, who is
Calvin Hudson.
yeah. I thought the fact that he didn't report right away that this guy had defected, and also tried to bring him back in, like, that's, I think you're way too close to that, and like, you can't do that. This guy is so deep in. You try to bring him back in, you're basically pulling in a spy. So I thought that was short-sighted, and probably because he was close to this guy. Like, the sentiment is nice, but I thought that was a very bad move. Like, if that would have been, I mean, that could have been a great plot line. He's like, yeah, I'll come back. And then, like, the next 2 seasons is just the Maquis seeming to undermine the Federation. But that was my one thing where I was like, oh, Cisco, no, 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 no. So.
It's kind of the same as like Picard with Ro, though. Like when.
But she's not in the position that this guy is.
I know. But I'm just saying, like, it's the same sort of idea where, like, I mean, if right now,
I see
Erin,
what
you
you're
suddenly,
saying.
yeah. Like, if right now, like, you left our show and were like, sorry, I gotta go join this terrorist group, like, immediately we'd be like, whoa, buddy, like, what are you, come on. Like, and I know it's hard when people believe certain things, like, it's like when people get real deep into conspiracy theories, and, like, the more you try to argue with them, the more it solidifies their stance, and they think that they're smarter. So sometimes you just gotta be like, this is dangerous, and I'm backing out, or, like, we gotta just separate. So,
Yeah.
yes, I think Cisco was trying, like, the friend thing where he's like, you're not too far gone yet, like, come back, but it's hard to see when somebody's like, like, I should just stop.
Yeah.
I don't think it would ever compromised or lost him his job, but it was such a situation that, like, this new group just happened. He's like, well, I can't have you. I understand what they're doing and why, but, like, you shouldn't leave. You should stay with Starfleet. So.
Yeah, it's like I'm having Falcon and Winter Soldier vibes, where Sam was like, I agree with your fight, but not the way you're fighting it.
Yeah. Like when he says that to Carly Morgenthau.
Yeah.
The fact that I remember her name, Jesus Christ.
Hey, she was.
And you're not remembering episode titles?
It's
Come on.
because all they did was change Carl to Carly from the comics. That's the only reason I remember it. So
Yeah.
Good times. Flag
Yeah.
Smasher. I digress.
So where do we go?
In true DS9 fashion.
In true DS9 fashion, the episode ends in either a positive or negative way. Cisco wonders if he has prevented a war or just delayed the inevitable, and Kira says he deserves the credit from Starfleet, but she is silent on what the future holds. Did we like this ending? Was there anything else we wanted to see from this episode?
I liked, there was a part, this is dumb, but I liked like the first meeting where Cisco came into that little boardroom they were having, and it was like the Cardassians and the Starfleet people, but like, the settled people. And I don't even know what the guy says, but one of the Cardassians says something awful, and the guy, it's so 90s, he like steps on a chair, steps on the table, and then like bodily jumps over at him like, I'll kill you.
You know what?
Right?
I
So
totally
Busan.
agree with that guy though, and that because like that was after he found out that his friend had died or committed suicide in his cell, and that after they extracted a confession from him. And that,
but it was such a like the way
over the top.
Yeah, I loved it. I was just like, oh yeah, I miss you, 90s Trek. Like,
90s Trek, so cheesy.
Like, that was like you're watching community theater. Like,
Yep.
I just had to
You're
make
like,
sure
oh,
that
this
got in
improv
there.
group is really good. I'm glad I paid $5. Oh man. Yeah. I mean, 90s Trek.
yeah. This episode was so good all around in that I love the little subplot involving Quark and him macking on a Vulcan.
Oh my god, I almost forgot about that.
I know.
Quark.
But then him out logicking her in the holding cell.
That was good.
Yeah.
She was intrigued.
You're going to explain logic to me. But he made a lot of sense in that, you were arguing that, the piece that they were seeking, and that was they were going out the more expensive way of acquiring it.
Pieces,
there was
pieces at a cheap premium or something, he says.
He said there's a cheaper way of attaining that piece, and that the way you're going, it's like you overspend on anything, your venture is doomed to fail.
Should Quark be a negotiator for Starfleet?
Quark
Yes.
is one of those characters that just gets better and better throughout that show, and by the end you're just like, this man is a genius. You know, he really gives depth to Ferengi, and I'm glad about it. And so does Nog. I mean, Nog's my forever fave, but I love Quark.
But-
I like how this episode ends, but like it's like so many other DS9 episodes where like every once in a while you'll get a positive ending where you're like, yeah, the things were solved and things feel good, but most of the time you're left with either like, oh, I just got gut punched, or like, wow, what's gonna happen next? Or
Yeah,
where are we
like
gonna
you
go
know
from
what the
here?
next
Yeah.
season's gonna be about.
So
That
like
kind of
you
thing.
already know that, you know, it's enough just dealing with Bajorans and Cardassians, you know, going head to head and him trying to keep this treaty and everything. Like, okay, let's not start another war. And then out of nowhere, you just have like, when he's like, oh god damn it, and he's like, which side did it? Nope, Maquis now, third group. That's not even Dominion stuff. That comes later.
Mhm.
But I do like that, like you mentioned, Kira basically is like, oh, like good that Starfleet gave you commendations for what you did here. Like it was important, it was a good job. But then she's just like, as for the future, guess we'll see, because holy shit, did stuff just get more difficult? And I like that. It makes you want to
It's
keep watching on repeat. Yes, Netflix, I
it's not a
will
nice
continue.
bow at the end. It's like, oh, okay, let's strap in.
Absolutely.
No, I mean the final conflict between Cisco and Hudson and that, it literally ends in a stalemate in that, even though like Cisco could have taken the opportunity to kill him, you know, as he would have been justified, and Gul Dukat was there like just egging him on, and Gul Dukat knew how to work those controls. He
true.
did before he even boarded the ship, as he liked to remind Cisco in that. But
Oh, I love
it
that part.
yeah, it ended in a stalemate in that, and I think that, you know, I think as a point for the episode and the conflict in that it was a good way to end on.
I agree. Schaus, do you want to do our final episode, or do you want
Sure.
to?
Yeah. Actually, this was my favorite
Yes,
of all of them.
do it.
Nice.
I knew you wanted to. I could feel it.
All right. So Return to Grace, season 4, episode 13. Federation and Cardassians working together. And I like how Brittany put this,
Yep.
Gul Dukat and Kira frenemies. Like
Yeah, right?
anytime we have those two characters interacting together, it's awesome.
Oh man,
So the
it's like
quote
the
that
best
you
dialogue.
oh, so much so. So the quote that we have here is, "Was that necessary?" And then Dukat goes, "You're the terrorist. You tell me." So it's you know, Dukat and Kira after Dukat kills the Klingons, the defenseless Klingons, right? So there's
Yeah.
still that banter back and forth between them, right? So the synopsis: Kira and Gul Dukat chase the Klingon bird of prey that destroyed a Cardassian outpost, where Cardassian and Bajoran representatives were holding a conference. This is the one where Dukat was demoted because he brought his half Cardassian, half Bajoran daughter, Toraziel, home to Cardassia. And so, what did this demotion do for his character, and did it make sense for this episode?
I say a demoted Dukat is the best Dukat, because like you're so used to him having these positions of like power and always being so nefarious and like not necessarily in always doing something bad, but he's always pulling strings to find things out for himself, like getting information or doing things to, you know, rise his status or like, you know, cut down other people around him, stuff like that. So to see already that he has to have Kira come along on this mission and help out because like he was demoted to this level where he's literally just commanding the ship and he's got to find out what happens. It's great because it allows the two characters to actually have that time together, to have this bickering, to like flesh out their sort of like, I know that some of the planning they wanted to do things that it seemed more like of a romantic potential, to which case I'm like, Kira would never
Never.
ever
Ever.
never do that. But anyway, it's just nice to see because like Gul Dukat is that kind of person. He does it. He nudges playfully. He does, you know,
Oh
that
yeah,
flirting.
but he
Kira's
wants
just
what he
like,
can't have, right? He's always had that
oh,
kind of
for
power,
sure.
right? So he
That
wants
is
what he can't
exactly how
have.
he is. That's his goal. He has the gall to hit on her. But I love it. I like that he has to get taken down a notch for you to see more about him. And I think it also helps with his relationship with his daughter and with Kira finally realizing different parts of him through seeing how he deals with his daughter. It's neat.
I love a demoted Dukat. We forgot to mention in the previous episode how the central command of Cardassia was ready to throw him under the bus and that for the
absolutely.
supplying the demilitarized zone Cardassians with the weapons and that. And in this, it's just a continuation of that. You know, there's always this thing about jockeying for position within Cardassian society and trying to undercut the other guy to get above that. And
You
seeing
want to play
him
your Cardassians, right?
exactly,
Or else you get flushed out. I don't know anything about poker.
So yeah, it was amazing seeing him demoted to basically like a freighter captain.
Yeah.
And then Kira being the one who actually helps him I guess not I guess not, you know, she helps him get what he
helps
wants.
Him get reinstated indirectly.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's what he's good at, isn't he? He like in the Cardassians, he manipulated the situation and, you know, help me help you sort of thing. Help me help you help me.
Yep. And by the end he's like, oh wow, I can ask myself to be reinstated ASAP. And then he's like, pew, blows up the Klingons too, and you're just like, okay, guess you'll get a Medal of Honor for that. Jesus.
I love how they steal the bird of prey in this episode.
It's
like
so slick.
It's one of those Star Trek things that just has stuck with me as such a really neat idea. This idea of using the transporters to swap crews. So they ended up, you know, they ended up on the bird of prey, and the Klingons were on the Cardassian freighter. So cool.
That's a good move.
Yeah.
I like that part.
Yeah, like it's just every now and then they throw like a technological idea at you that they just haven't done in previous episodes, and you're like, oh, that's really smart, like to use the transporters that way or do something cool with the tractor beam.
Just transport crews and
but then they balance it out with like they take pictures with the biggest fucking camera you've ever seen in your life, and you're like, what?
Oh
man.
Exactly. Okay, so for better or worse, Kira and Gul Dukat have affected each other's lives and have provided each other with a lot of character growth. Do you like the Dukat-Kira team up in this episode? And how do we feel about Gul Dukat, and this is Brittany's words, macking on Kira?
Like the team up, hate the macking.
Yeah. Hate the quote romantic tension they go to, but I love the fact that there's this team up, because you just love when they butt heads. Like, it's just so great. It leads to great dialogue. Like, Kira's just like, oh, you talking to me? Like, I don't get distracted. And he's just like, well, I like to dream about blah, 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 undercutting my enemies and leaving them on a frozen death planet. And I'm like, okay, man, keep talking about yourself. But man, it makes for fun dialogue, but sometimes I'm like, leave Kira alone. Go away, you jerk.
She's dealt with enough. Leave her alone.
She's powerful enough that, like, even when he invites her to dinner and she's just like,
I think that the one thing with DS9 that bothers me is there is a lot of aggressive hitting on women in the future, which I don't love. And I actually find it like, because Kira is a survivor of, like, you know, basically their own Holocaust. And I think there's something, if you think about it in that way, pretty dark about this guy who's, you know, a representative, somebody who was directly involved in that, like, you know, being like sexually aggressive towards her. Like, that's horrible. I think that they played a little for laughs, but to me that it's just like, you know, as a woman I have a strong reaction to it, because Brittany, I'm sure, like almost every other woman,
trust me,
like,
when you learn more about Kira's past, like, there's not good things that happen to her mother and everything else. So
yeah, I've seen that
Kira
episode.
has gone through some dark stuff, and by the end of the show you're just like, wow, this show is really about Kira. Sometimes you're like, I love Cisco and it's also equally about him, but you get two halves of that. But yeah, that's why I also don't care for, because like Dukat, I'm just like, give up, it's not gonna happen. Like, you can flirt with anybody you want, leave Kira alone.
It's so gross. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
It is, but that's also
Like,
how I felt about Julian until they stopped having him hit on
my
Dax.
God.
When he finally stopped, I was like, I love this friendship. Leave her alone. Don't touch her.
You can be friends with a woman.
Deep Space Nine.
It does work.
And now you know.
The more you know.
Especially with it, you know, with Kira. I mean, like, because I never knew, like, Kira endured 26 years of the Cardassian occupation of Bajor and that. So it's like, since she was a small child, you know,
basically her whole life.
Yeah, and the fact that, you know, that Dukat thinks, you know, hey, we had a fun adventure together, and that, you know, we could probably wash that whole away and start a new chapter. It's like, no, No.
But like how even in the end, she doesn't even fully state that like that's where they're at. She literally tells the daughter, "I will never forgive your dad for anything, and he better not hope for that." But in the end, she does something that's right for the kid, and that's what I like because she's just like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, you're raising this kid to be a little child soldier. Like that's not gonna happen. She can come to Deep Space Nine with me, have a better life. You can do your shady shit. I can do my shady shit. Sometimes we'll team up to do shady shit together. That helps us both out." But we're gonna be moral gray area frenemies, and that's the line. And I'm like, we love that for her. She's setting boundaries.
Yeah, the sins of your father are not your sins. They're not gonna Hunger Game those kids. Like, you're gonna pay
Not
for
Mm.
your parents.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and I'm gonna say that for the sake of the character, not specifically Kira's character, but Gul Dukat's character, I'm kind of glad that he was kind of shady like that, that he was kind of gross like that, and it's because Kira is so strong that at no point did I ever feel like she was going to fall for him,
Oh yeah.
even with him being as aggressively flirty as he was toward her. I almost felt like he needed, like the character of Gul Dukat needed to be rejected. He needed to, like, for his own
He's like,
character
"Please,
growth.
for the first time in my life, reject me. Nobody has ever."
Right?
And she's like,
Because
Well,
he
people
was so
rejected him, but
powerful.
they didn't have a choice. So
Exactly. Yeah. And so he was so used to getting whatever he wanted, especially from the helpless Bajorans, right? And then because of that, when he found something else that he wanted, in Kira, and she was strong enough to reject him, I felt that it added a little bit to that character that like I disliked him a little bit more because of how gross that whole thing was. But I also liked the character arc a little bit more too, because of the direction that he was sort of forced to go, and and where it sort of ended
Yeah.
up leading the character throughout the rest of the series.
they definitely strengthen each other, whether it's them arguing or working together. And one of my favorite shots is when she's in the ship and she's like sitting there like piloting, like she's at the helm and stuff, and it's like everybody else on the ship is Cardassian. That is insane that you have like this Bajoran woman who's like in the resistance, actively fought against these people, killed, innocent and not innocent people, and like is literally there with people like a race that has oppressed her. And
Yeah.
is just like totally unbothered, sitting there, like, not that she's unbothered, but like the way she plays everything off, and she's just like, I'm here for this mission, this is what we're doing. Like, that's amazing that she
Yeah.
was able to be the one person on the ship, like, has no protections really from the Federation other than like hopefully he's holding his end of the bargain and she's not gonna be like taken somewhere. It's awesome. I love that for her. She's great. It's my
we
quote
love
of the night.
Kira.
Kira, she's the best.
So then Kira offering to take Toraziel to DS9 is a large step in her journey as a character. Do we agree with the choice that she made? And do we like this for her character?
Oh, I think I accidentally already answered that earlier.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfectly.
I like
Perfectly.
Yeah, I like it because
But you did answer it in the wrong spot, so we will have to cut it. I'm sorry.
yeah, my bad. This will be in the bloopers. I answered the first part with like, do I agree with the choice? Yes, it was good for her and everything. I also like this for her character because she is somebody that right away when you see her in the show, that as much as she is a strong female character, and I try not to use the word strong female character too much also because that can take away from things as well. But she has this damaged past. You've seen up to this point more of like what she had gone through her whole life. You learn more about her as a character, why she is so distrusting of Cardassians and specific people like Gul Dukat. And the fact that she's able to make this sort of step just in this episode alone to help a child have a better life, like just the way she greets Odo and says like, it's a long story, I'll tell you later, but like get this kid started first. Like there's no issue. She doesn't bring it up, but like, oh, I had to bring this kid along. Like she did this, it was her choice, and it was more like she convinced him like, hey, I know you want your kid to be around you and like live this life, or, like status, all that, but like you can trust me to make sure your kid is safe on a space station. We are like enemies and I will protect your kid on a space station. That's like huge. So I was like, wow, character journey and a half. She went to Mordor and back, and it's only what, season 4? Jeez.
Well, and it's not, I'm not saying it's strategic, but there's also a level of like detente there. We have your child on the space station.
Oh yeah.
I'm not saying that's why, but like it's a nice little bonus of
Yeah.
you're not gonna just get a missile fucking coming towards you at any time,
Yeah.
day or night from
It's a reminder
Gul
to
Dukat.
behave, also to be like, hey, we are taking care of your kids, so like, don't
Yeah,
betray
not a
us,
hostage,
don't
but just
disappear.
saying.
Anyway, she's going to school with like Keiko. You know, she's living her best life.
So it's a
Yes.
bit Game of Thronesy.
Yes. Oh my god, yeah, it is.
Right?
Yeah, remember like
Snow.
yeah.
The whole show is so political and like thought out, and she really is. Like Kira's even more so than Cisco, the
This
person
is the
that
OG Game
she
of
doesn't
Thrones.
want to be like as political, or I don't even remember what the diplomatic or something. Gul
She's
Dukat
not
like throws out
particularly
some term at her.
diplomatic.
Yeah, like, but the thing is, she gets put in these positions where she has to be that way, sort of thing. So she's learned by season 4. She's like, oh yeah,
She knows how to
my
play
rules.
the game.
Yeah.
I love
I'm
it.
so glad she made the decision to bring her in that, because like basically Gul Dukat by the end of the episode, when the Cardassians have basically told them to, stand back and stand by,
Mhm.
and he decides like, screw this, I'm going to go out, I'm going to start my own little guerrilla resistance against the Klingons, and that, come on and join me in that. It's like, no way, you're not bringing this kid along with you
Yeah, she's
either.
like, that's your own thing.
Yeah.
I also like that, we brought up his demotion, but one of the main reasons that he was demoted was because he brought his daughter to Cardassia and she was like half Bajoran, half Cardassian. So that already showed that the only reason he ever did that is because his other interactions with Kira throughout the way. Like, she literally was like, if you're going to be a father to this kid, you better be a father to this kid. Like, this is how you show up and support this kid. So it's weird. It's not like she's her mom in any way, shape, or form, but like, she's done more to shape him into being, quote, a better, I guess, sort of figure or role model to his kid. I'm not going to say a better human being.
Slightly less horrible.
Yeah. That's the thing about Deep Space Nine. By the end, you're like, some of these people are slightly less horrible. Are they deplorable? Will I ever forgive them? Will Kira? No. But like, did they grow? Sure. That being said, we're going to move on to mailbag if nobody else has anything to add.
Mailbag.
I was just
Mailbag.
picturing like some merch that you guys could do as a T-shirt that has just a Star Trek Deep Space Nine in the Game of Thrones font.
I'm writing it
Yeah.
down.
That's
I have a
basically
whole
what it is.
T-shirt file.
There you go.
I sent it to Eric and I'm like, hey,
Cisco
I'll let
breaks
him
the
know
wheel
for
by
sure.
becoming a prophet himself.
Well, Eric is gonna hear this. He's gonna edit the episode,
Oh, yeah.
so
He'll know. We'll bring it up. There's so many things I've said that are T-shirt worthy, and it's just we need to have the time and the money to make them. So thank you for supporting our show. We're gonna end the night with some mailbag. I'll try and make it quick so you guys can hopefully watch Lower Decks before passing out. So for mailbag, we asked all of you, wonderful viewers, what is your favorite DS9 Cardassian episode or arc? What do they, as villains of the series, mean to you? And Rob said, hard choice, but one of my faves is DS9's Duet. I agree. Great episode that fleshes out Cardassians in ways both interesting and horrifying. We learn a bit about the atrocities of the occupation, stuff so stomach-churning that the main guest character is a Cardassian so consumed with guilt that he's trying to get himself executed. It's a difficult watch, but it has so much to say about trauma, guilt, and forgiveness, whether it's Maritza coming to terms with what he's witnessed and it not being his fault, or Kira learning that not all Kardashians are evil. I said, I can't. Not all Cardassians are evil. Just great.
no, you said it right the first time.
Yeah, the
No, my
Kardashians
tongue was
are
just
evil.
like, I ran out of water like 30 minutes ago, guys. It's bad.
What's
go
his
ahead.
name? Modiphius?
Modiphius, yeah.
Yeah, Modiphius.
I think Damar has one of the best Cardassian character arcs in the series, from Dukat's loyal goon to Cardassian martyr. Heck of a ride.
Yeah. Yum Yum Pod. Yum Yum Pod writes, it has to be Dukat and his inability to come to terms with his inherent evil. As smart and charming as he could be, he couldn't wash off the blood no matter how many speeches he gave. The crimes of war and the horrors of fascism aren't things you just shrug off, deny, embellish, or erase, but Dukat tried to do that for 7 whole seasons, and it was wonderful to watch.
Yep.
The Cardassians are the foes in Star Trek that are the most worrisome because they most easily reflect an evil we see in the world. How when hatred grows en masse into a unified effort and can become something more sinister. Fascism.
Yes. I love that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I love our mailbags. Everyone's so smart.
So SMK says, I am a big fan of the arc of for Enobram Tain, which is Enobram Tain is awesome. We first meet him when Garak needs parts for his anti-torture implant in the wire, and he's creepy, to say the least, knowing details as small as Bashir's beverage choice. Then we see him again in Improbable Cause in the Dias cast, where he decides to personally alter the course of history by trying to attack the Founder's homeworld. This is quite reminiscent of stories from the intelligence community where individuals act with extreme hubris and make choices that have resonated through history. Finally, learning he is Garak's father is quite the reveal and gives Garak's character the background it needs for being so duplicitous. Yeah.
Duplicitous.
At its core, the Tain story shows how militaristic culture enables the worst actors in the worst ways. People who decide they are acting for the good of the country by means of deception and manipulation. Unfortunately, we have seen this too many times, whether it's Meshigas during the Cold War or the run-up to the invasion of Iraq. The Tain story shows us the unchecked pseudo-military authority acting in the shadows is damaging and ultimately futile.
Yes,
John Walker.
SMK with the smackdown.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Nice.
Chef's kiss to
All
every mailbag. Everybody.
Yeah, that was a
Right on
good
the mark.
mailbag.
That was solid. Everybody's, I mean, they're all opinions to begin with, so everybody's, correct with their own opinions. But like, these are like, whoo, these people.
Hey, some
get
people are
DS9.
not correct with their opinions, but all
Well,
four
that's
of these
true,
guys
but-
were.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So anyway, that's it for our show. I want to thank you, Schaus, for being on. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. That was
coming
fun.
in.
Thank you to
Joining
my
the party.
wonderful co-hosts and to everybody watching. Stay tuned next week. I think Lower Decks is back.
Lower
next week.
Decks!
Lower
Yeah.
Decks
So
next
next-
week, season 2.
Episode
Check.
1 of season 2 will be reviewed by our wonderful podcast. I may or may not be there. We shall see. Either way, make puns in my honor.
will.
But stay tuned. And tonight, right after we are done, there'll be a Lower Decks rewatch of the previous season. So hop on our Discord, join there. If you don't know our Discord,
We're doing Moist
It's
Vessel
somewhere on the
tonight.
video.
Episode
Yeah,
4,
let's do
Moist
Moist
Vessel.
we're gonna keep Moist Vessel. It's a good one. So yeah, check us out, watch us then, and we love you. Have a good night. Live long and prosper. Thanks for beaming into our podcast today. If you want to keep the hailing frequencies open, you can subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Like what you hear? Put in a good word with Starfleet and leave us a 5-star review.